John McMullen, an Eagles fan? A Green Day fan?
Green Day fan. I would imagine that would not fall into the John McMullen genre. But let's bring Johnny Mack in for Football at 4 at JF McMullen here on the Sports Bash Live on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Johnny Mack, welcome back. What's up, man?
Doing well. I actually do. I enjoy Green Day.
So do I, Johnny Mack.
Yeah.
I would not.
Billy Joe Armstrong. Interesting. I used to live in Mankato, Minnesota. He married someone from Mankato, Minnesota.
How about it?
And Colin will say that's good Green Day knowledge.
No, that's good Mankato, Minnesota knowledge.
Sure is. All right. A lot of stuff to get into here, John, as the Eagles getting ready for the Dolphins. Let's start with this. Brandon Brooks spoke today. I find it ironic. Here's a guy who had to leave the game because of anxiety, and he had 50 guys around his locker. Talk about getting anxiety.
Yeah,
I mean, give the guy a break when he comes back. But no, is the anticipation that he will have to miss any time moving forward? I know that's kind of a touchy thing for him to kind of deal with and the team to kind of deal with, but what did he have to say today? Because I think, obviously, between him and his partner next to him, they might be the two most important guys on this offense.
Yeah, and they're both going to play, so that's big for the Eagles. Lane's going to be back at practice tomorrow. Brandon said today he plans on playing, and that's part of it. The bigger issue from his perspective was the contract extension. He puts a little bit too much pressure on himself and kind of fell back to having one of those attacks that he really hasn't had since 2016. So he says he has a plan. He says he's working through it, but he plans to play in Miami. So, that's big for the Eagles to have both those guys because that was a big issue on Sunday, the right side of the offensive line. And all of a sudden, you have those two guys playing at their typical level. That's the best right side in football. So that should be a dramatic swing and make things much more comfortable for Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and, I contend kind of yesterday – I don't know if the weapons are there, but if Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks play as bad as they look, they might have won that game with just those two guys playing for how important they are to the offense.
They're weapons in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. It is. As I said, it's the best right side football in the offensive line when those two guys are playing at the level that they have been playing this season. I mean, Brandon got that extension because he's been the best right guard in football, arguably the best offensive lineman overall in football. And it's interesting that you could play at that level and have anxiety over it. And it's part of it's a double-edged sword. It's part of what makes him great because he always thinks he has to live up to the billing and pushes himself, and it affects him at sometimes. And yeah, you're right. And then you got to deal with it with 50 microphones stuck in front of your face. And I can tell you it's anxiety being in that group of 50, never mind being Brandon Brooks. So it's an interesting – it's tough to fight through. And Brandon has been above board about it and has mentioned how many NFL players as a whole deal with things like that or similar issues. And I say it all the time. A lot of fans don't look at these guys as human beings. They're human beings, and they have problems like everyone else has problems, and that's one of Brand's problems.
All right, let's go to the other two guys, Jeffrey Aguilar, and I guess Jordan Howard, if you want to throw those three together. Where do they sit on this Tuesday? Because as we know, Thursday, everybody will be off, so it'll be kind of a weird week for getting the news and information. But do we have any updated stuff on their potential status for the weekend?
Yeah, Nelson spoke really quickly today, only took about 3 questions, but he said he hopes to play. He's working towards it. Jordan, I think, is the one that's probably farthest off. He still has not been cleared for contact. So he's dealing with more than just the stinger. He doesn't have the strength back in his shoulder yet, and until he gets that clear, it's hard to imagine him playing. And Alshon, Doug said he was trending up last week. You would think he'd be closer this week. There was the hope, I know, from the organization that he would be able to play against Seattle. So another week, you have to say odds are pretty good that the team expects him to be out there.
Jordan Howard.
Real quick on the Jeffrey thing. Is there some thought that maybe at the last minute he just let everybody down? I mean, it sounded as if everybody was under the impression, and Doug even said, hey, this stage of the year, you kind of tough it out. It sounded like he at least thought that they would give it a go. Is there some possible thought that Alshon maybe at the last minute decided,
There's a lot of rumors around that guy. There really is. And part of it is because he doesn't speak that often, and he has been kind of dodging people. And I think that kind of spawned speculation. But, yeah, I mean, Doug was talking about it like Alshon and Nelson were going to give it a go. And certainly from my perspective behind the scenes, I said all week I thought Alshon was more likely than Nelson. I think from Nelson's perspective, I think that was an opportunity for the team to sort of give him an opportunity to take a step back without benching him. You remember in 2016 in Seattle, they benched him for that one game, sort of gave him a little bit of a break, but they didn't want to term it as a benching. So I think that from his perspective, I think it was more of that, and I think he's going to play against Miami. From Alshon, yeah, I think the team thought he was going to play. I really do.
With Jordan Howard being out, and I'm a Miles Sanders fan, and I thought with only 18 carries between him and Jay Ajayi, I thought this would have been the game saying, hey, Miles Sanders, who's your shot to be the bell cow? And again, I think that's a good ratio, 12 rushes for 12 rushes for Miles Sanders and a few rushes for Jay Ajayi. I think that's successful. Do you think that Miles is ready to take the next step as a guy they're going to feed the ball to 20 times a game? Maybe it's 15 rushes and 5 passes, or is he still a rookie and is not ready for that workload yet?
Yeah, I think from the team standpoint, he's not quite ready there. And I think he got a window into that when Doug spoke earlier this week, and he talked about Miles needs to be in the right spots, right places. As a receiver, as a blocker. And we talked a lot about some of his indecision as a runner. When it clicks, and everyone will look at that 65-yard touchdown run, he's very explosive. You've seen it some in the passing game, the explosive plays. But, Colin, coaches preach consistency. And if you do have a big play and then you come back and do 2 or 3 things wrong, they don't think as highly as maybe the fan base does. So I think that's where they are with Miles, and the preference would be to have Jordan Howard be the lead back and him be the complement, but you got to make do with what you have. So either you ramp up Jay Ajayi and give him more responsibility on the running part of it, or you almost have to feed him the football. And maybe this is a good stretch where you can let them get out there, let them play, let them learn on the field and make some mistakes, because let's be honest, you're about to face some pretty poor competition over the next few weeks.
What about Dallas Goedert, John? Because there's been growing talks about him and having a down year. I know he's been excellent blocking both run and pass, and we all know what he's capable of with his skill set, but you look at his numbers, and I guess they're not outstanding, and some people have gone on the record saying not what they expected him to do production-wise. Are you disagreeing with that? What have you seen from number 88?
Well, yes and no. I think as a blocker, he's exceeded expectations from everyone, and he wasn't used as a blocker in college because he played at obviously a lower level, and he was such a star catching the football. That's how they used him. And all of a sudden, he's got the big frame, and he's got the want to do it, and he became a really good blocker as a rookie and had a real aptitude for it. I think he's only gotten better. From a receiving standpoint, I think you see big playability. A little bit with Miles, same type of thing. You see the mistakes, though, and he got stripped of the football. That can't happen. Sometimes he doesn't attack the football when he's trying to catch it like he should, and the Eagles are trying to teach him that as well. But all of that will come, and I think it's natural for young players to have hiccups, and I think Dallas is having them. But overall, I would say the Eagles are very, very happy with his development as a player and thinks he's going to be a really good tight end for a really long time.
Now, Greg Ward is someone who, and we talked about him a lot yesterday, and he caught the ball. His numbers weren't outstanding. I believe it was 6 for 40 yards Sunday against Seattle. What's his role moving forward? Because he's someone that played the quarterback position. He's someone that has a lot of speed. He's diverse in his skill set. What can we see from Ward potentially, this week and the rest of the way?
Well, I mean, if Nelson's out there, he goes back to a backup role, and he's probably not going to get a lot of time. But he did open enough eyes to the point where they're keeping him on the roster moving forward in case more goes wrong with Nelson Aguilar specifically. And they released, obviously, Jordan Matthews. So he took advantage of his opportunity. He's now a part of this 53-man roster, but I do think his playing time moving forward has to do with whether Alshon and Nelson are out there. If they're going to be out there, he's not going to play that much. So it kind of hinges on where they are.
The offense has been a point of emphasis to the media, questions from the media to the coaches, the fans. The offense has been the talk. Carson Wentz's struggles, the play calling, I guess people say there's struggles. I think Doug Peterson's handcuffed, like we talked about last night on the Countdown to Kickoff show. But really, to me, the stars of the show, which have not been talked about the last 2 weeks as much as they need to be, is the defensive side of the ball. If you had to pick a few players, John, or maybe just one or two things, why have they been so successful the last 2 weeks after really not being successful for the first majority part of the season?
Well, I look at two things, and I look at Fletcher Cox getting healthy up front. Remember, he was playing, but he was coming off that foot surgery, didn't have an off season, didn't practice at all in training camp, showed up a week before the season and played. And he was not 100%. He was not completely healthy. He was not himself. He's gotten closer. Essentially, that first month of the season was his preseason, and he's ramped it up, and he's been playing like the Fletcher Cox we all expected to see. So that helps because we all know the engine of Jim Schwartz's defense. He constantly says it is the defensive line. So when you have a game wrecker like Fletcher Cox playing at that level, it helps out everything. And then the second part is getting Jalen Mills back, which I think has surprised many people, even myself. I mean, most of the fan base thought he was terrible. We all kind of knew he's a solid player, and he's very important to this defense. But he's played better than that. He has played well. He has played like a top-tier corner since coming back into this lineup. And that has given Jim more confidence to do so many things, not only use different coverages, whether it's, cover 3, whether it's invert, cover 2. He's throwing so many more things at opposing quarterbacks, not just press coverage. They blitz more. They're more comfortable blitzing because they think the corners have the capability to hold up. So they just can throw a lot of different pitches at quarterbacks now, and they weren't able to do that earlier in the season.
Johnny Mack with us, Football at 4. Now, I know Mike Groh was kind of, I don't want to say grilled, but there were multiple questions today regarding, I guess Dan Orlovsky had some videos yesterday, and he was kind of suggesting that the receiver's lack of detail was more of the reason for Wentz's struggles. Did he kind of now, it sounded like he was saying, I don't know what this video you're speaking of is. I got to imagine if everybody else saw it, they had to have known that a former NFL quarterback was basically roasting the wide receiving core. But how did he kind of tiptoe around the lack of production from his wide receiving core based on what those videos said? That, maybe these guys have talent, but they're not being coached very well, it sounds like.
Well, they're never going to admit that, obviously, the coaching staff. I do think he mentioned they haven't had enough time together, the young receivers, with Carson Wentz. And I think that, and Colin can talk about this when I'm off the air as well. I'm sure he has. I'm sure he will. But I do think people don't know or understand how limited practice time is in the NFL now since 2011. And basically, when you're in game prep, the first team is getting first-team reps. Third-team guys who aren't supposed to play are on the scout team. So they don't get a lot of time. Guys like Greg Ward, who's been on the practice squad, JJ, who's been buried on the roster as a deep reserve. They don't get a lot of time with Carson Wentz during practice until they're needed and until they have to play. And that's where the
John,
chemistry.
I'm sorry, they run a lot of routes on air. I want to continue with your comments on chemistry, but what routes on air is, okay, hey, we're going to warm up JJ, run that shallow route, and it's going to be zone coverage, and you're going to sit down in that zone against a coach standing there mimicking a linebacker in practice to get Carson warmed up, to get you warmed up. Well, he sat down in the zone this week. He hopped, which I'm sure the coaches freak out about, and the ball blasted through his hands on the inside shoulder, and it looked like a bad throw. Well, if he didn't hop, the ball's right between the numbers. But
which was displayed in Orlovsky's video. In fact, they did it this morning on Get Up, where they actually moved JJ from where he hopped to back to where he would have been, where the ball was thrown in and would have hit him right between the numbers.
That's high-level stuff right there. But I'll tell you what, and John, I want you to continue with the chemistry conversation.
Because one other video that he showed was, John, Greg Ward, who was open on a play, but he wasn't turned around.
He ran the route too deep. He was supposed to run it to the sticks, and the ball would have been right there. So it is. Look, I don't want to defend Carson Wentz, and I said to me it was his worst game, certainly since his rookie season at least, maybe his worst game as a professional. I mentioned yesterday I don't think he handled the adversity well with the offensive line. The ball security's got to be better. But, yeah, a lot of times with the receivers, they weren't where they were supposed to be. And, Dan explained it well, Dan Orlovsky, and he said you can't fool the quarterback if you're a receiver. And in essence, that's what the receivers are doing. They're supposed to be – NFL teams spend a lot of time running routes, especially in the screen game as well, where you have to hit your landmarks. You have to be at the right spot. And Doug Peterson mentioned that again with Miles Sanders. And a lot of times you don't even realize maybe that player's not in the right spot. And it usually happens with younger players. And that's, I think, and players who don't get to practice a lot with the first team. And I think that's kind of what's happening with the Eagles right now.
I think it's a great point. That's why I'm not a fan of post-game grades, because we don't know the play.
You want us all to lose our jobs?
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't break down how things go.
Grades are everything.
I mean, Scott Grayson has got he's the number one clicked-on story every Monday.
And it's fantastic. I think it's great to discuss, and it creates.
C's get degrees, Colin.
I hear you, buddy. That's why I'm sitting right next to you right now. My point is, I'm down for the grade. And the conversation to come with it, but to put like an A or B, or say Carson got an F, like, did he really get an F? Does he really deserve an F for that game? He does not, because of what
no one really does.
I mean, but say it's his worst game of his career. Say that's the F for him, and then the A is insert game from 2017.
Yeah.
Is he really – was it all his fault? Say 5 things were his fault. If you have 5 bad passes in a game, that's really – I don't know. That's the NFL average probably. Now, I'm not saying he played a great game or a good game or was even just on par. I'm just saying – you don't know what the route is. We don't know the offense. I saw it happen live because I've ran that route in practice and in preseason football games, I don't know, probably 50 to 100 times against live action. So I knew that JJ was not 2 yards outside the hash, and that was a miss on him and not Carson. So that's why I'm not a fan of it. I'm not coming at the jobs.
No, but I think it's good perspective for us to have that knowledge now. And by the way, Orlovsky's a guy who nobody else in the media has pointed something like that out either, to where we're like, you know what?
Bryce Treggs did.
I beg to differ, because as
Bryce Treggs.
Colin, I said in live time, that was a bad route by JJ on my Twitter account, and I got killed for it live as it happened.
Mac.
But
besides you, John, we know you bring the knowledge.
No, but I'm saying, like, on a
national
level, you don't see people on television a lot of times breaking down a route and saying the receiver made the mistake here. It's easier on.
If you're watching on TV, it's difficult to see.
Yeah.
I have the luxury of being in the press box during the game.
Humble brag.
And you could see, no, it's not a humble brag. You can see, Colin, as you know, that's why coaches are up there. You can see the whole field.
Comfy press box.
No, John, you're right.
The warm part of it's better. The warm part of it is better.
People say, oh, why isn't the coach on the field? The press box has the overall vision. So you're getting heckled out right now for your tweet. Like I was getting heckled. Hey, Josh, are we ready for that audio? I was getting heckled last night at the Countdown to Kickoff show with my pick of the Ravens are going to run them out of the gym. And everyone
was heckling you. People at the
well, let's play the clip. Josh.
I said the Ravens were going to win.
Josh, if you have the clip, let's play the clip because I think it's going to just paint a nice little story of what happened last night. My last show, by the way.
No,
the Rams at home.
I'm not taking the Rams or the Ravens. I'm taking the Ravens minus 6.5. Alternative line. It's going to be a butt whooping. I take a minus 9.5.
You don't have to.
Who cares about you? No, I want you want to take. I'm not into the gambling thing, but I'm sure the odds are better. So listen, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't care about where the money's going. Watch what your eyes tell you. Who are the Rams stopped this year, and who have they moved the ball on? They're struggling. So they're hot as ever. I don't think this team's peaked. I don't think you look ahead because the Rams are a good team. They know that struggles about going to the West Coast. So they'll be locked in, and they're going to whoop them tonight.
They may. You may.
Wow. Johnny Mack, the only one on my side.
Yeah. Well, I said and here's where I said Tony was wrong. Because both Tony and Colin said Baltimore is a dominant team right now, maybe the most dominant team in the NFL. They obviously are after that game last night. If you believe that, you don't worry about all the other stuff Tony was talking about.
They're like, the money's
home
all on
dog,
the Rams.
all that nonsense. If they're a dominant team, they're going to show up and they're going to whip an average team, and that's exactly what happened.
Johnny Mack's always had my side on the countdown.
Well, if you listen to the All In podcast last week, we do our locks of the week.
A couple weeks ago,
that was my lock of the week. It was, which one is it? Ravens. Ravens over Rams. I think the Ravens right now are playing at a level where their confidence. Look, teams get bored of the regular season sometimes, and they have that game where they just don't show up. The Ravens don't seem bored. They feel like they're making a statement every single week. John McMullen, football at 4. And by the way, Johnny Mack, who are you voting for NFL MVP?
Oh.
Lamar now. And it's interesting. I had Russell before this week.
Boy, week 12 was a big lane shifter.
The Eagles.
And the Eagles kind of, they didn't completely shut down Russell. He had some opportunities to make some plays. There was the DK Metcalf drop, the pass in the corner of the game. He could have run it in or thrown it to Jacob Hollister. He didn't make the play. But the Eagles made him uncomfortable.
Yeah. The Eagles definitely should have taken JJ over Metcalf. That guy can't catch.
Oh, jeez.
Bust.
There we go.
All right, Sports Bash, Johnny Mack here. Football at 4. We're back tomorrow with we'll cram in the week here with football at 4. We'll try to get as much information as we can as the Eagles get ready to take on the Miami Dolphins. Johnny Mack, we'll talk to you tomorrow, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.